Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. Thanks for joining me for another week. And thank you to those of you that continue to listen to this podcast. I'm grateful for each and every one of you. Before I get into today's topic, few favors that I ask every single week. Number one, make sure you're subscribed on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. So we're on Apple, Spotify, Google, all the major podcast platforms. You'll also be able to find a video version of this on YouTube, and you'll also be able to find some backdated video versions of this on the Facebook page. So the Unstoppable Dad Project on Facebook and at the Unstoppable Dad on Instagram. Jump on there, follow along, have a look at the content that we put up. I can be hit and miss with the content sometimes. I am not a great social media person, but I am learning to be better with the stuff that I've put out there. While you're there, if you want to join along and you want to join one of the training programs that I offer, and I talk about that a lot in all of the podcasts that I do. Obviously, the podcast I do for free. It's free information for you guys, or even girls, if there are girls listening to this, where you can hopefully get some good, usable pieces of information that you can go out there and you can take action on, and you can use that information to hopefully help. And that's the whole point of this. It's to give you an insight into my life and things that I've come across, not only personally, but as a coach over the last 10, 15 years. I've been fortunate enough to run my own gym and do a lot of coaching with people from all different walks of life. So this is just my way of hopefully giving back and hopefully letting you know, if you are going through some dark times at the moment, that you're not alone. There's a lot of people that are going through very dark times in today's day and age. There's a lot of uncertainty out there. There is a lot of fear out there, and just be sure that you're not alone. And if you need help, reach out for it. Talk, ask for help, talk to your friends, seek professional help if you need it. There's no shame in going and talking to somebody if you need to. And that's just what I wanted to open up this week with, because there's been a few people that I have spoken to who have reached out to me who it would be more beneficial for them to go and seek professional help when it comes to dealing with their mental health challenges. And I think we all have them to some varying degree, and no one's ever really going to understand exactly what you're going through because it's your individual set of circumstances. But sometimes, you do need to talk to somebody who's not a friend, who is educated in those things. And yes, sometimes, like for me, I've found a lot of value in talking with my close friends and family around some of the things that I've struggled with. But sometimes you need to go that one step further, and there shouldn't be any shame in that. There shouldn't be any guilt in that. It should be something that is all encompassing for you to try and look after your health, because mental health is such an important part of it. So if you need help, reach out. If you want to talk about training programs, obviously that's my forte. You can reach out to myself and I can help push you in the right direction. Now, sorry for that little rant. That intro's gone for a little longer than I wanted to, but that's really the big message with this podcast, right? Like, it's all about putting information out there, and it's all about, if you need help, like, ask for it. Because as men, as fathers, as husbands, I think we let our pride get in the road far too much. And we think we should just grit and bear and try and get through it, rather than just putting the ego aside and asking for help. And the topic of today's podcast is, I wanted to talk about, like, understanding what the priority is when it comes to anything. Because as busy people, I think we need to have an inherent understanding of what our priorities are. And this has been a topic that I've spoke about for a long, long time on the podcast and different variations. And this week I was having a conversation with an old client of mine, somebody that I coached quite a while ago now. And this gentleman, he's not a father. He's just somebody that I've coached in a few different areas over the years. And he's moved away, and he contacted me because he wanted me to do a program for him. And he wanted me to do a program around, he's just started Jiu Jitsu. He's 4 months into his Jiu Jitsu journey. And we spoke about like why he wanted to do the program, why he felt it was important. And he rattled off some things like he wanted to be stronger, and he's talked about how he's losing weight and he feels like he's losing muscle mass and things like that. And that's why he wanted to do the strength program. Now, this guy's not, as I said, he's not a father. I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of people. Obviously, I'm focusing more on working with dads and busy parents right now, with my online program, but I still work with a lot of different people from all different walks of life. So he wanted to invest in a strength program because he thought it was going to help him with jiu-jitsu. And when we spoke about why, and we spoke about the underlying reasons why he's looking at doing this, we actually got to the point where I actually suggested to him that he didn't look at doing a strength training program. And here's why. The number one priority for him is to get better at jiu-jitsu. And given that it's a sport, or it's a training methodology, or it's a self-defense regime, whatever you want to classify that umbrella, it's a recreational sport for most people, right? It's a sport that I've done for now going on 7 years. Actually, it'll be the time that I've released this podcast, it'll actually be 7 years almost to the day that I started doing this particular hobby, this pastime, this sport for myself. So I have a pretty good understanding of what goes into it. And I've had my fair share of bumps and bruises. I've had to dial back my time on the mats in order to spend more time in the gym. I've had to up my time on the mats and dial back my time in the gym. It's been quite a journey. Now, for this gentleman, he's only 4 months into it. And the reason we got around to me actually suggesting that I don't think he needs like a really in-depth strength program built by me is because he doesn't know what he doesn't know when it comes to jiu-jitsu. And we talked about a few different things, right? Number one, what his focus is and what his priority is. And his priority is to get better at jiu-jitsu. So the only way you get better at jiu-jitsu or any sport is to do the sport. So that was number one. So that's the big priority. So if we're taking time away from that number one priority, what are we hoping to gain? Like, how is that going to feed into that priority? What are we hoping to gain by doing that? Because we have to have a really good understanding of why we're trying to do that. And then we started talking about, like, is he getting injured? How's the body feeling? Like, all these things, is all these things that are going to enhance the overall goal. He's not getting injured. His body's feeling pretty good. His major concern, realistically, when we got to it, was that he feels like he's starting to lose muscle mass, and he's losing weight. He didn't really want to. And so that opened up another conversation. But the big reason why we come back to the fact that I don't think it was a good idea for him to actually do that was he has a limited amount of time that he can allocate to training, right? He has about 5 hours a week. And so what he would need to do, being only 4 months in, he would probably need to look at only doing 2 or 3 sessions a week on the mats, and then doing 2 or 3 sessions a week in the gym, because that's the time he has to allocate to this activity. And I suggested that it would actually be better that if he just did 4 or 5 days a week of jiu-jitsu training for the time being, until the need arose for him to shift that, because he has more of an understanding of what's going on the mats, and potentially he's looking at maybe he does start to get some injuries, because when you do any sport, that's going to be part of sport. You don't want to get injured. You need to just stay in bed. He starts to get more injuries. So by taking the time off, it's actually going to enhance his time within the sport, or enhance his time on the mat. And we went back and forth a lot about this, and it all just kept relating back to what is the number one thing that we want to get to? Like, what is the number one priority? And it's a conversation that I've had with people time and time again, not just about training for a sport, but just training in general. What is the number one priority, and how much time do we have to allocate to that priority? And for the dads, that sometimes that number one priority is to be able to be a more capable husband, father, and human being, to be able to play with our kids for longer, to be able to get more time out of it. So by taking so sometimes we actually have to take time away from doing that particular thing in order to invest in ourselves so that we can have a higher quality of time when we do it. But it also doesn't mean that the time has to come away from that particular activity. The time can come away from other activities that are maybe a lower priority. Because when we start talking about priorities, it's almost like a hierarchy, right? So if we're taking the dad example, we want to spend more quality time with our family, and that might be the highest priority we have right now. And one of the things that may be stopping us from doing that may be our physical fitness. We might feel like when we're running around with the kids, we're not able to do it for as long as what we want to because we're getting short of breath. We are we're just losing energy very, very quickly when we're doing it. So, the second priority, which feeds into the first priority, is to spend some time on ourselves to enhance our physical capabilities. So, get us stronger, get us fitter, and try and raise that base level so that the top priority can be enhanced. Now, there might be that third priority underneath, which might be something else, and you can pull some time from that priority in order to feed that second priority, which in then feeds the third priority. So, when we talk about priorities and we talk about setting that hierarchy, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. A lot of the times when we actually dig down to it and we dig down to the fact that we want to spend time on our health, and that might be third or fourth on the priority list. By becoming more physically capable, becoming fitter, that will actually start to feed into the other things that are more of a priority. It may make us more productive at work. And you will see plenty of stuff on the internet where people are going to say it will do this. Well, I'm here to tell you there's a pretty good chance that it would, because if you're functioning better and you're spending some time on yourself, you're probably going to be clearer of mind, and you're probably going to be able to, all in all, like function better. So it should, but I'm going to say it may, because there's no absolutes. It's always context dependent, right? It may make us more productive at work, therefore making our job easier. It will more than likely help you with the time that you are spending with kids, especially if they're older, they're more active, you're having to start to run around after them. I went down to the park with my kids the other day and we were kicking the soccer ball around, and I was very thankful that I didn't even have to have a think about like running around with them. I wasn't concerned about putting a time cap on the amount of time that we were down there for, because I would get puffed or out of breath or anything, or I wouldn't be able to, do anything for the afternoon, because I'm confident in the base level of fitness that I have due to the training the level of training that I do. And that's important for me. And if it's important to you and you're struggling to find that time to allocate to it, sometimes we need to look at the hierarchy of priorities, which is exactly what I did with this gentleman when I was talking to him on the phone. For him, it wasn't about he's a young single man that is looking to do this particular sport or this hobby and this pastime. And he wanted to add in an extra activity which he felt was going to be beneficial to his main priority of getting better at this particular sport. But when we actually drilled down to it, adding that in wasn't actually, for him and his particular set of circumstances, wasn't going to feed into his main priority. And when you're looking at adding activities in, taking time away from other things in your life, you really need to understand that, is this going to enhance the main thing I'm looking for it to enhance, or is it going to detract from it? Because there's going to be instances where adding it in will enhance something, or will enhance a higher priority task or a higher priority outcome. But there's also going to be times where by adding extra things in, you may actually find that it detracts overall from the goal that you were hoping for it to achieve. And that's where I think, to almost tie it all the way back into what I said at the start of this episode, it's important to ask for help and get an objective opinion around it. Because I think all too often we feel and especially men, and I'm probably more guilty of this than most people. I think we feel like we have the answers for everything, our own problems, or more so, we need to find the answers to our own problems. And it's a shot to our masculinity and our manhood if we ask for help. Whereas I'd almost pose the question that it's the opposite way. I think you are almost being more of a man by asking for help and admitting that there are things that you don't know and there are things that you need help with. And there are things that you need someone else's opinion on, because that's why there are experts in this world. And I'm not even going to get started on the amount of snake oil salesmen and fake experts that are in there, but I'm talking about people who actually have experience in the area. They have the qualifications, they have the knowledge, but most importantly, they have the experience, whether it is the experience, their lived experience, or it is actually experience where they've plied their trade over time and they've worked with people in a similar situation. Because sometimes adding extra things in for ourselves, thinking that it's going to enhance what we want it to enhance, is only going to create extra stress. And it can actually create this flow on effect where we start to not enjoy and we start to actually lose interest in the things that we want to do more of. So understanding your priorities and understanding how one priority can feed into the other before you start adding any extra activities or trying to take time away from things is such an important thing to understand. And sometimes, even if you aren't asking for help, and this may be an activity for you to do, if you're thinking about doing this, you're thinking about adding something in because you feel like there's like a missing piece, and if I can just do this, it's going to take me to the next level. And sometimes that's all it is, right? There's a linchpin that you need to pull and bang, everything blows up and we've just got that magic formula. But when you're short on time and you're busy, you've got kids, you've got job, you've got, relationships you've got to maintain. And I believe that the vast majority of people that listen to this podcast are in that boat. When you're in that position, you have to be very guarded with your time. And you have to understand that time is precious and it's the one resource we can't make more of and we can't get back. So when you're looking at taking time away from things, thinking that by doing that, it's going to enhance something, it's going to enhance my life in a way which is going to be beneficial, we've got to look at, is it really? Or is this just something that I feel I need to do to satisfy something else that's going on? And sometimes having somebody externally just go to you and say, hey, look, you actually don't need to do this, which is the conversation I had with this guy yesterday. You don't need to actually do this. I know you think you do, but for where you're at right now, I don't think it's going to be a massive benefit for you to take this path and take this time away from this other thing when you only have limited time to do it. I think the time would be better spent for this guy on the mats because that's how he's going to get better at it. And for where he is at in his journey, that is going to be more beneficial. We did also talk about in 6 months' time, 12 months' time, 18 months' time, maybe it's a different story. Maybe it's not, maybe it is. But you reassess at that point. If you do start getting in for his particular situation, if he starts getting injuries and niggles and he's finding that maybe he can't spend the 4 or 5 hours a week on the mats in the capacity that he can, or he's having more time off than on because he's constantly injured, maybe then by adding in a couple of days of strength training and making sure he can stay consistent with a lower volume of training or sport training by doing the other stuff outside of it, maybe then it's more beneficial. But for now, for him, adding that extra stuff in would actually detract from what the overall goal is and what his number one priority is. And again, I know this is something, and this is a topic that keeps reoccurring, but I think before a lot of people undertake a new activity or start to add in things that where you're going to have to pull time away from other things in your life, you really need to look at, by adding this in, is this truly going to enhance my main priorities and the things that I really want it to enhance? Because sometimes it won't. There's going to be a lot of times where it will, but that's where I think it's important to ask for help. Reach out, talk to somebody who's an expert in that particular area, and then let them give you their advice on what you think is, on what they think is going to be the best way moving forward. And then from there, as an adult, as a functional human being, you can make a more informed decision on whether it is going to be beneficial to you. All right. That is it for this week. Hopefully you got something out of that. As always, if you would like to book in a time for a chat, maybe you're in a similar situation where you think that some strength training is going to enhance, or some fitness training is going to enhance a recreational sport that you do. If that's the case, book in a time with me. Let's have a chat. As I've just gone through in this, I am not, when I get on these calls, I'm actually looking at, is this going to be a good fit for you? So rather than like, can I sell you a program? Because at the end of the day, I've been in the position where people have tried to hard sell me on things that I haven't really needed. And you really have to be guarded, and you have to be prepared to say no to some things. So if you'd like to chat, book in a time, and yeah, sit down. If you're thinking about adding something in, good exercise for you to do is sit down with a pen and paper and write down like pros and cons of adding these things in. And maybe you'll be able to have a little bit more of a bird's eye view on, hey, is this going to be beneficial to me or not? So thanks for listening. Sorry if it was a little bit incoherent rant, but hopefully you got something out of it, and I will see you all next week. Goodbye now.